Hello everyone and welcome to Grandstand Sports Data. Are you ready to take your sports betting to the next level? In this video, we'll show you the amazing techniques and strategies you can use to make your bets more successful. From technical analysis tools to the steps in creating a model, you'll be able to make the most of your bets and increase your chance of winning. So if you're ready to learn how to dominate the sports betting world, let's get started. So as we have shown in all of our sports betting educational videos, these are the categories of a sports bettor. And we have to exercise these muscle groups in order to improve in the handicapping world. So in today's video, we're going to cover research and forecasting topics. Remember, most of our sports betting videos going forward will cover these important categories, so make sure to subscribe for more content and hit the like button if you would like to spread the word. It would be greatly appreciated. So let's start with what is technical handicapping. Well, what I like to do is almost go back to your 5th grade science class. Qualitative analysis and quantitative analysis. So qualitative analysis, we discovered, is fundamental analysis. It's quality. Whereas quantitative analysis is your technical analysis, where you're dealing with stats and numbers, hence quantity. That's basically the difference between fundamental and technical handicapping. Next, it relies on analytics. Technical handicappers use advanced math and statistics to help them make better bets. This is called analytics. They use analytics to research historical data to help make predictions on future performance. If you're a skeptic of analytics, just know analytics are being used to evaluate team performance. It's also used in shaping contracts and creating incentives in those contracts. It's changing games as well. As you can see, there's more teams in the NFL going for it on 4th down. NBA emphasizes the 3-point shot instead of mid-range. And also baseball, basically the baseball world revolves around analytics. Do not get left behind. Last, it relies on trends and patterns. I'm going to take you to the next slide, which is going to better, give you a better description of what I mean by trends and patterns. So by trends and patterns, it's like a game of connect the dots. Imagine that there's a big gray wall inside of your house, and say you give your children 2 markers and they randomly place 100 green dots and 100 red dots all over the wall. If you look far away, it looks like there are about an equal amount of red dots and green dots, which you would be right. There's 100 of each. Now in betting terms, I want you to look at the wall as your analytics or the stats that you believe are significant to make bets. The green dots would represent wins in your bets, and the red dots would represent your losses in the betting world. Now, if you take a closer look and divide the wall into smaller squares, you'll find that in some of the squares there are more red dots than green dots, and in other squares there are more green dots than red dots. The goal of technical handicapping is finding these trends and patterns in those windows, so you can predict which squares will have more green dots than red dots. By doing this, you can make more accurate predictions and outcomes. So continuing with the betting analogy, look at these windows as specific filters. The more filters you add to your analysis, the tighter the windows become. But be careful adding too many filters, because this could leave some of your windows not having enough of a sample size. And speaking of sample size, when you're trying to prove something with statistics, it's important to have a lot of data to look back on. If you want to make sure that the outcome you're predicting is correct, you'll need to look at a lot of games in order to make sure that any outside factors like bad weather have been considered. So I'd like to point you, all of these windows have almost the same, which is 5 green dots and 5 red dots. Unless you look at the bottom left-hand side, you will see that that window actually has 6 green dots and 4 red dots. That is a window that you will look into when doing your bets or placing your bets. Now, we will dive much more deeper into the windows. So if you're a little bit lost, we're going to pull you right in as this presentation goes on. So what are the ways to technically handicap? Well, usually there's three ways, and the first way is systems. Systems are patterns of events that can help you make a better guess about an outcome of a game. It looks at things like the past performance of each team, the weather, who's playing, and other things that might affect the outcome. But they are not specific to a particular team or player. Which brings us to our next bullet, which is angles. And angles they're different from systems in that they are specific to a team, they are specific to a player, or even a venue. And it cannot be applied universally. So to use an angle, the bettor looks at data from the past to try to figure out if there is even a pattern that might lead to a good bet. And number three, a style of technical handicapping that has become popular over the years is modeling. Some modelers will praise modeling like if it's the only thing that a bettor needs and this is the only way that you can be successful in betting, which I think that you need some level of modeling, not a full-blown model, but basically, to put it in layman's terms, modeling is a way of using computers to recreate activities or plays or even full games, maybe even all season long predictions, and you put it in a digital form. So you should replay these virtual realities over and over until you can understand what is happening on average. So please remember that technical analysis is difficult, but it can be beneficial if you're willing to dedicate the necessary energy and patience. If done correctly, it can result in positive outcomes in the long run. Technical analysis can easily be combined with other approaches as well. So there's no reason you can't start with fundamentals or power ratings or however you start to handicap a game and then see if systems or angles can reinforce your predictions. So first we're going to cover systems. Remember, systems are patterns of events that can help you make a better guess about a result of an event. So it looks at things like the past performance of each team, the weather, who's playing, and all the special effects that could outcome a game. But then remember, they're not specific to a particular team or player. So let's look at the steps to a system. You usually have to get historical data from your sport. Next, you would search through that historical data for patterns that can be used for bets. 3, you would monitor the sport on an ongoing basis to watch for those patterns. And then 4, place bets when patterns align. Now, let's go back to our wall scenario that I showed you in the beginning of the presentation. Getting historical data would be placing your red and green dots on the wall. Now, number 2, when you search through the historical data for the patterns, this is basically putting your lines or your filters. Now, say if it's like a home team winning by this amount of points on a Wednesday night, that is you placing more lines to spot your windows, which would be number 3, monitoring those windows. Once you find more greens than red, would be number 4, placing bets. So here's the scenario. So a system is like a big puzzle. It has a lot of pieces that need to fit together in the right way. The pieces are the conditions or the filters and the logical operators like and, or that put all of them together. So here's an example. If an NBA game is in the first 3 rounds of the playoffs and the favorite lost their last game and the team opens as more than a 9-point favorite, you should bet the favorite. This is 30-10 in the last 15 years. Now, when we apply our wall scenario, everything in green is our lines, creating our window. And once we find our window, which is having all 3 of these filters, which are the 3 green lines, then you find betting on the favorite to be your most best and predictive outcome for that window. Hope that makes sense. Next is our angles. So our angles, it's a type of betting system that are used to identify profitable betting patterns in sports, just like systems. But they are different from systems in that they are specific to a team, player, or even a venue. To use an angle, the bettor looks at data from the past to try to figure out if there is a pattern that might lead to a good bet. When the conditions for the angle setup happen, the bettor can bet according to the data. That's simple. If you look, the whole steps to betting an angle is the same as systems, except for number one. You'll be filtering for a specific team, a specific player, specific coach, or a specific venue. So here's an example of a setup for a coach-specific angle. In an NFL playoff game, if Bill Belichick is the coach and it is in the conference championship or Super Bowl, bet under the first quarter. This system is 10-1 in Belichick's whole coaching career. Remember, this is just like the gray wall scenario or the comparison that we've been making throughout the video. The 3 green lines are us setting up our lines on our wall to where we filter the right window that has more green dots than red dots. In this case, this system is 10-1 in Belichick's career, so you would see 10 green dots and 1 red dot. That's just to give you an illustration of the situation. So system and angle bettors usually follow a process like this once a week to identify games and bets that would be eligible for a system or an angle play. This process involves filtering games like we mentioned, variables, and any other factor that meets the condition of the system or angle. But listen to me, don't only bet on systems blindly. If your other variables are pointing in a different direction, you have to reevaluate your selection or just stay away from the game or prop altogether. Next is modeling. So modeling is a way of using computers to recreate activities, plays, games, even full seasons in a digital form. You should replay these simulations over and over until you can understand what happens on average. For example, if you wanted to know the best way to bet on a game for the best way for a team to score a certain number of points, you could write a computer code to create this simulation. So the simulation would simulate the game, and you could use it to figure out the best betting strategy. It can also be used to predict player performance, maybe even outcomes. The opportunities are endless. If you need guidance on where to go from here, this is a step-by-step model building illustration from us at Grandstand Sports Data. What we do first in all of our betting models is we collect and analyze data. So you find the stats that correlate with the betting market that you are in. So remember, when sorting through historical data, the goal is to identify statistical correlations and conditions that can predict the outcome of a game before it begins. You also want to find logical connections between the correlations and the result that makes sense and shows why the data is important. For example, the NFL yards per play stat and turnover differential have a correlation to the margin of victory. And this can help you to point spread bet in the NFL. But remember, stats like passing yards per game have no correlation to margin of victory. Number 2, develop. When you develop the model using your statistics, create a model that can accurately predict the future performance of a team or player. This can be anything from regression analysis to Monte Carlo simulations. You can dig as deep as you want, but make sure the prediction output is bettable. Our next step is we confirm the model. This is test the model's accuracy by comparing its predictions to its actual results. Test the model by running simulations over 500 times to get an accurate average outcome. Next would be optimize. This would be making adjustments to the model to improve its accuracy. This could also be done by assigning weights or comparing multiple models into one big model. If you have a number of variables that you believe equate to a team's success, adding weights, like we said, to each of those variables on how you think the outcome will go. Next would be number 5, and we would deploy the model. So now we put the model into practice by using it to make predictions. This is where you'll add your predicted odds so you can compare them to the odds of the market to see if you actually have a betting edge or not. And finally, and I would say the most important, is you have to track everything. This is just not for modeling. This is for the whole sports betting experience. You have to track everything. Track the model's performance over time to ensure it is still accurate, and track all variables. So what are the pros of technical analysis? Well, the first one would be if you have a great model that can predict games better than average, you don't even have to watch the games. You simply plug in your statistics, the output will be your betting model, and you place the bets. But remember, this is only if you have a good betting model. Next would be unlimited tools and resources. You can go to almost any sports website for handicapping, bet tracking, or any specific sports. There's sites coming out almost every day or being created every day for you to take information from or to apply to your model. That gives you a betting edge. Next, it's going to help you place more efficient bets. Things like the Kelly criterion betting strategy is a way to use this information to decide how much to bet on, like a specific team or player, and it takes the historical winning percentage and it turns it into a win probability, which is then plugged into the Kelly formula to determine how much to bet. Also, something that we haven't touched on yet, but a gambler's Z-score is a way to use historical results to give you a better idea of how confident you should be when betting on a team or a specific player. We will be making a video soon about Z-scores and probabilities, so make sure to hit the subscribe button and give us a like, and stay tuned for that video as well. Finally, would be most sports bettors are square. So most of the guys you see in sports books, your buddies, your friends, co-workers, they bet specifically on their gut. They have no power ratings, they have no statistical models, they just see things, they just read the board. And if you're just reading the board, you're a square bettor in the long run. It's that simple. Well, so when there's pros, there's also cons. And so these are the cons of technical analysis. But first, when you're betting with data, it's important to be careful. You can buy systems and angles from services, or you can make your own, but you need to make sure it's a good system with good reasons behind it as well. Otherwise, you might end up believing something that isn't true or inventing a story that fits the data even though it's not real. It's important to take the time to get the right system and make sure it's based on facts. The first bullet, and definitely the most important, is patience, patience, patience. If you have a system that you used to bet on, it might work out 50 times over the season, but you could still have some bad luck and lose a few games in a row. This doesn't mean that your system isn't working. It just means that you had some bad luck. It's hard to tell the difference between bad luck and a system that doesn't work, so it's important that you keep trying even though you had a bad few games. Also remember, past performance doesn't equal future results. This is huge in the finance industry. Remember, analytics are not always accurate. Just because you can describe the past in lots of different ways, it doesn't mean that you can predict what will happen in the future. Next, you have to remember, games and teams change over time. In sports, the rules change all the time. This affects scoring, and it also affects different eras of the game. This means if you want to use data to bet on sports, you need to make sure that the data is still accurate and not outdated. Also, teams have players and coaches that move every year. Even though teams may have done a certain thing in the past, it doesn't necessarily mean that they will do the same thing in the future. You have to be wary of angles that hold a long-term stat for specific teams. Next, well-known systems are baked into the line. Odds makers are aware of popular systems, such as the NBA zigzag playoff system, and will adjust the lines accordingly. If a bettor finds a system that produces a consistent profit, it is best to keep it a secret to maintain its profitability. Handicappers can use simple systems to help them decide who will win a game, but once these systems become public knowledge, the betting lines will reflect this, reducing the chances of the profitable bet. Finally, don't overfit. Overfitting occurs when someone tries to find patterns in a set of historical data that may not actually be meaningful or predictive. If done correctly, discovering a pattern in teams and bettors can be extremely profitable, but it can also be difficult to know if you found something useful or just manipulated the data too much just to sound good so you can bet on it. So, what are the best traits for technical analysis? So, technical analysis means finding situational patterns that lead to a profitable game bet. Your goal should be to find and bet on systems and angles that have characteristics described in the following sections. Sample size. The biggest mistake bettors make is pretending there is a story in the data when there's only randomness and luck. Make sure there is a long enough sample size to prove the system or angle. Next, it has to be predictive. If you can't find causation or at least a chain of logic that connects why conditions of your system or angle lead to a certain result on the field, you've either stumbled upon randomness or just plain luck. Next, and probably the most important, it needs to be bettable. Your system should be connected to the result of a particular wager. So your system should correlate to points, point spreads, over-unders, or other typical pregame bets. Next, it has to be time appropriate. If you don't have enough time to act on a system, it won't be useful. So for example, if your system involves in-game patterns, the odds change during the event as it is going on, which makes the system irrelevant. Additionally, if your system is too complex or requires too many stipulations, it won't be profitable. Last, it should be recurring. Your system should involve a pattern that appears often enough to make worth tracking. So if you find a system that happens maybe once a year for the Super Bowl or say Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals, great, you found a good system for that, but you can only bet it once a year. This makes it not enough volume, and it doesn't recur enough in the betting process. So as always, we'd like to thank you for watching our video on sports betting models and technical analysis. We hope you got some value and insights on how to make smarter bets. Don't forget to subscribe to Grandstand Sports Data for more educational betting videos. Hit that like button if you found this video useful. Share this with your friends and let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. Thanks again for watching and good luck with your future bets.